They say the wind never stopped howling the night it happened, that it cried like a woman mourning something ancient, something never meant to be uncovered. The townsfolk of Dust Creek territory still won't speak of that winter, not because they've forgotten, but because some truths are too heavy to name aloud. In 1862, 4 women vanished from the same homestead. No bodies, no footprints, no trail, just a man, calm, unreadable, who said they'd left him to follow a higher calling. That man was Mr. Elijah Hargrove, and his house. His house was built on something far older than timber and stone. Before his arrival in Dust Creek, no one had heard the name. No family lineage, no known history. Yet somehow, Elijah had documents in perfect order, land rights signed by territorial authorities, and an introduction letter bearing the seal of a now-defunct Eastern congregation. He arrived alone. Within a year, he had 4 wives. Not sequentially, simultaneously. And not young girls or desperate widows. These were educated, capable women from different parts of the country, each with letters describing his divine purpose, and the strange sense that he had shown them their true reflection for the first time. The settlement whispered. They called the homestead the Hollow House. No children were ever seen there. No visitors stayed past sundown. People spoke of strange chants carried on the wind, of a lantern burning at midnight in the attic window, flickering in rhythmic intervals like a signal to something unseen. And then, in February of 1862, after the harshest storm Dust Creek had seen in decades, they were gone. All 4. Elijah said they left to spread their message eastward. The problem? The eastern routes were impassable. Frozen over, blocked by landslides, cut off for months. And the letters he claimed to receive from them afterward? Everyone burned in his fireplace before anyone else could read them. The town sheriff visited once. He never returned. Days later, his horse was found wandering near the Devil's Bluff, saddle torn, hooves bleeding. The sheriff's badge was found lodged between 2 jagged rocks, bent nearly in half. Elijah said nothing, just watched, silent, from the porch, as the search party stood paralyzed by something they couldn't name. You were never meant to know this story. They buried it beneath religion, power, and the sanitizing pages of frontier history. But here's the thing about buried truths. Eventually, the roots grow deep enough to break through stone. The house Elijah Hargrove built stood 3 miles from the main Dust Creek chapel, hidden in a basin where the sun died early each afternoon. Locals said the land had always been wrong, even before the first settlers came. Horses refused to cross the northern fence line. Dogs howled at the wind without cause. One elder called it a place stitched thin between worlds. That was long before Elijah laid the first stone. When construction began in spring of 1860, he insisted on building alone. Neighbors offered help. He declined, claimed God had given him specific instructions for its design. Every beam, every nail, placed in precise accordance with something he called the geometry of obedience. The house rose fast, too fast. Locals whispered that it looked more like a shrine than a home. Octagonal windows, symbols carved into door frames, a chimney that didn't smoke, even in winter. The cellar, it was said, went deeper than any cellar had reason to go. And then came the women. Each arrived separately, and always at night. No fanfare, no wagon trains, just a lone rider seen once at dusk, and then the woman would be inside the house by morning. No introductions, no farewells. The first was Miriam Caldwell, a schoolteacher from Pennsylvania with no surviving relatives. Next came Helena Reyes, daughter of a Spanish herbalist, vanished from a convent registry in Santa Fe. Third was Abigail North, a widow from Boston whose husband had perished under suspicious circumstances aboard a missionary vessel. The fourth, Esther Morrow, was the daughter of a Unitarian pastor who denounced her disappearance as a theft of soul under the guise of holy marriage. And yet, each woman wrote glowing letters to bishops, cousins, and orphan friends, praising Elijah as the vessel of sacred renewal. They spoke of visions, of rituals that purified the bloodline, of hearing music not made by man. Then the letters stopped, one by one. No farewells, no change of address, just silence. It wasn't grief that kept the town from asking questions. It was something deeper. Dust Creek had seen madness before. Droughts, fevers, fanatic preachers. But Elijah? Elijah didn't scream. He didn't burn. He didn't demand obedience. He simply waited. And the terrifying thing is, people began to believe. Power does not always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And when it whispers long enough, men call it truth. The cellar beneath the hollow house wasn't made for storage. That much became clear after the investigation, though investigation is generous. In truth, it was a quiet visit by a church-appointed elder named Jonathan Pike, sent under strict instruction to observe and report. Nothing more. What Pike found beneath that house was never entered into any official record. But years later, his grandson would describe the old man waking in the night, clawing at his own skin, whispering about walls that breathe. According to a torn and signed letter found in Pike's personal Bible, the cellar was not built. It was uncovered. Elijah had removed layers of stone and claimed not to build downward, but to reveal. The walls were older than the house above, older than the settlement. Fused rock shaped in unnatural symmetry, impossible to attribute to tools of the time. There were inscriptions, yes, but not in Latin, Hebrew, or any known tongue. Symbols etched so precisely they bled light in the dark, according to Pike's trembling account. The room at the bottom wasn't wide, but circular, perfectly so, and in its center, a slab of smooth obsidian, untouched by dust, uncracked by frost. On the slab were 4 indentations, each shaped like a human body, female, adult, precise to the inch. Not dug out, formed, as if the stone had remembered their weight. He saw blood, not spilled randomly, arranged. Thin lines crossing the floor in a pattern so intricate it resembled a map. Pike followed the lines with his lantern until he reached the far wall, where a single phrase had been etched into the stone in English. She is bound in 4, and through 4 she will awaken. Who was she? Pike didn't know, but he knew this. Elijah Hargrove believed he had married not women, but aspects. Not wives in the earthly sense, but vessels of something layered, ancient, divine, and waiting. This wasn't a man who lost his mind. This was a man following instructions. The real question is, who gave them? Not all gods come from the sky. Some are pulled from the earth, piece by piece, soul by soul. Do you feel the descent? Then let's go deeper. Why the winter of 1862, Elijah Hargrove no longer attended chapel. He no longer came to town at all. And yet, his influence thickened like smoke without fire. A preacher's son named Caleb Brent began speaking in tongues during Sunday service. His voice changed, deepened. He said things a boy of 10 could not know. Details about church elders' sins, secret debts, adulteries whispered behind closed doors. One elder dropped dead on the spot. The others took it as divine judgment. Caleb was never seen again. That same month, 3 families moved out of Dust Creek overnight. No notice, no sale. They left everything behind. Clothes on the line, meals half-eaten. One man, James Toller, left a single sentence carved into the floorboard of his barn. She is walking the boundary. People started seeing figures in the woods. Not people exactly. Tall, thin, always facing away. They wore long dresses. No faces, no tracks, but always 4. Always watching. And yet, no one challenged Elijah. Why? Because every man in that territory felt a part of them agreeing with him. That is the terror no one dares speak aloud. Not that evil exists, but that it makes sense. Elijah's writings, later recovered from a hollow beam in the house, were not rants. They were blueprints, theological, metaphysical, even mathematical. He referred to the tetrad of unbinding. 4 women as 4 limbs of a single entity. He claimed their union was not symbolic, but sacramental. That through a ritual he called the dissolution of names, each woman had surrendered her personal identity to become a facet of something he simply called Mother Below. And here's the truth no one wants to face. He didn't make it up. Variations of the same ritual, 4 vessels, 1 awakening, appear in Mayan glyphs, Sumerian tablets, even the apocryphal texts of the Gnostics. Always hidden, always forbidden, and always ending in disappearance. Elijah didn't invent the ritual. He reactivated it, and the silence that followed wasn't absence. It was gestation. If you made it this far, you've crossed the threshold. There's no returning to what you thought was real. In early spring of 1863, a fire broke out near the western ridge of Dust Creek. It scorched half a mile of brush, crept toward the chapel, but when it reached the hollow house, it stopped. Dead, as if held back by an unseen border. Witnesses, including the local undertaker and 2 town elders, testified to seeing the flames bend away. Not jump, bend, like water parting around stone. That's when people began calling the house hollow, not just because of its name, but because of what it did to sound. Birds refused to sing near it. Wind moved around it, not through. And if you shouted from the road, your voice came back different. Slower, drawn out, like it had been chewed on before being returned. The house had become something else. And still, no one dared enter. Until Nathaniel Cross arrived. He was a circuit judge from Missouri, sent to investigate rumors of spiritual heresy. A stern man, rational, the kind who measured truth by statute, not scripture. He rode in with 2 armed escorts and a federal mandate to question Elijah Hargrove, or remove him if necessary. He was never seen again, but his horse was found 3 days later outside the chapel, its eyes white, its body trembling. On the saddlebag was a small cloth pouch tied in red string. Inside were 4 teeth, human, filed down to points, still wet. That same week, townsfolk reported dreams. Not fever dreams, the same dream. A staircase made of flesh descending into black soil. A cradle rocking underground. A voice, female, but layered with others, whispering one phrase over and over. Open the 4th. And just like that, it stopped. No more sightings. No more letters. Elijah was never seen again. Neither were the 4 women. The hollow house stood untouched for decades. Doors locked, windows dark. The land around it refused to grow. But beneath, something lingered. In Dust Creek, it withered. By 1871, it was a ghost town. Locals claimed the ground went sour. Wells dried. Livestock miscarried. No storms. Just a creeping stillness, like the town had been closed from the inside. You feel it, don't you? We're not just telling a story. We're remembering what was buried. And memory is a form of resurrection. The hollow house was finally opened in 1902, 39 years after Elijah vanished. A team of 4 men from the state capitol arrived with axes, lanterns, and legal documents. Not priests, not investigators, just land surveyors tasked with reclaiming abandoned property. They were hardened men, war veterans, civil engineers. Men who didn't believe in ghosts. They were never seen again. Their carriage was found outside the property. Untouched, horses still tied. 1 lantern left burning, melted nearly to the base. A journal was recovered from the driver's seat, belonging to the youngest of the 4, Thomas Breck. The final entry read, "The door opened before we touched it. Something inside was waiting. The state sealed the property, officially condemned. But that didn't stop people from trying to enter. Paranormal researchers, occult thrill seekers, a few local teenagers. Some came back, but none the same. 1 girl, Anna Wells, was found barefoot 2 days later, wandering the edge of the nearby forest. Hair white, eyes unfocused. She didn't speak for years. But when she finally did, her only words were, "They don't walk like we do." And that brings us to the floor beneath the house. The same floor Pike described, and that others whispered about in hushed tones. In 1924, an anthropologist named Miriam Keene secured rare permission to study the site. She was brilliant, skeptical, and bold. But after her 3rd descent into the basement chamber, she refused to speak publicly again. Her personal letters, later uncovered by her niece, describe geometric tremors, patterns that pulsed beneath her feet like a second heartbeat. She claimed to see the stone itself breathe. In her final letter, she wrote, "The womb is not sealed. It waits for alignment. For names lost. 1 name whispered. We don't know what the name is. But we know this. In every town where descendants of the original 4 women fled, strange things happened. Fires, floods, unmarked graves. And in every one of those places, something was drawn on the doorways. Not a cross, a spiral made of 4 circles, overlapping, tightening, pointing down. She was never exorcised. She was distributed. And now the pattern is nearly complete. The family trees of the 4 women, Abigail, Mercy, Ruth, and Esther, were quietly traced by a clandestine order within the church known only as the Watchtower Circle. They weren't public. They didn't wear collars or robes. They were archivists, linguists, sometimes undertakers. Their only purpose, to track bloodlines corrupted by proximity to the unseen matron. Each woman had a child, none acknowledged by Elijah, and none recognized by the town. But all 4 were born on the same night, February 4th, 1863, during what local almanacs recorded as a night of no stars. The moon vanished, wind stopped, clocks failed. For 4 hours, time seemed to hold its breath. And in that breath, they arrived. Those children were not raised together. In fact, each was given to a different family, far from Dust Creek. But their lives followed eerily similar paths. Strange illnesses, vivid visions, missing time. One drew symbols on the walls before she could speak. Another refused to sleep above ground. One boy was found whispering to a hollow tree for hours, insisting someone was answering. All 4 died before age 12. All 4 bodies disappeared within hours of burial. No exhumation, no vandalism. Vanished. The Watchtower Circle documented all of this. And yet, they didn't act, not openly, because they feared something larger. Something beneath the soil of Dust Creek, pulsing still. A structure, not built but grown. What they called the subterraneum. A cathedral without spires. A temple with no congregation. The only remaining fragment of that report, preserved in the margins of a 1906 sermon transcript, reads, "The mother does not birth in blood. She births in silence, in absence. Her children are not born. They are remembered." By the time the 20th century rolled into full motion, Dust Creek was wiped from most maps. But the pattern continued elsewhere. Strange quakes, sinkholes shaped like spirals, voices heard in the walls of condemned buildings. And one curious consistency. In each place for women had once lived, neighbors, sisters, nurses, friends, and always one of them went missing first. She is not gone. She is multiplying. She does not knock. She seeps. You've heard the stories. But now you're part of one that, in 1937, a construction crew working on a new rail line near the abandoned Dust Creek site unearthed something unexpected. Not a body, not bones, a door. Beneath 12 feet of undisturbed earth, they hit a metallic surface shaped like a hatch, round, with no hinges, no handle, and marked with 4 interlocking rings. A symbol not known in any culture, but seen before, in dreams, in sketches made by the children of the 4, in the eye of a cow that was born blind and died screaming. When they tried to cut it open, every blade snapped. Torches failed to burn. One man, Thomas Grieve, touched it with his bare hand. He convulsed. Eyes rolled back. When he came to, he said a single word over and over. Below, below, below. The hatch was left buried again. Not out of fear, out of necessity. The soil refused to rest unless it was covered. The ground would rumble, throb, and one worker reported hearing something from deep within. A lullaby, sung backwards. After that, the government quietly seized the site. Official documents listed it as a failed mining claim. But photos taken before the cover-up showed a wide depression in the earth, like something had breathed out from beneath, then held its breath again. There was no follow-up. Because the people involved, the engineers, the laborers, the geologists, either vanished, went mad, or took their own lives within months. Letters from their families all shared one haunting phrase. He keeps mumbling about the 4th. The number 4 appears again and again. For women, for children, for spirals. 4 nights in a year when the veil is thin. The Watchtower Circle believed these were not coincidences but instructions. a calendar marked in trauma and silence. And here's where it gets worse. One of the Watchtower archivists, Father Ellison Gray, traced the spiral to its origin. Not Dust Creek, not even this continent. He linked it to a buried structure beneath the Negev Desert. Another hatch, sealed by time, surrounded by 4 empty graves. He wrote one final letter before he burned every document and disappeared. She is not rising. She is returning. And she remembers who opened the door first. That door was not physical. It was Elijah. And perhaps it is you. In 1937, a construction crew working on a new rail line near the abandoned Dust Creek site unearthed something unexpected. Not a body, not bones, a door. Beneath 12 feet of undisturbed earth, they hit a metallic surface shaped like a hatch. Round, with no hinges, no handle, and marked with 4 interlocking rings. A symbol not known in any culture, but seen before. In dreams. In sketches made by the children of the Four. In the eye of a cow that was born blind and died screaming. When they tried to cut it open, every blade snapped. Torches failed to burn. One man, Thomas Grieve, touched it with his bare hand. He convulsed. Eyes rolled back. When he came to, he said a single word over and over. Below, below, below. The hatch was left buried again. Not out of fear, out of necessity. The soil refused to rest unless it was covered. The ground would rumble, throb, and one worker reported hearing something from deep within. A lullaby, sung backwards. After that, the government quietly seized the site. Official documents listed it as a failed mining claim, but photos taken before the cover-up showed a wide depression in the earth, like something had breathed out from beneath, then held its breath again. There was no follow-up, because the people involved, the engineers, the laborers, the geologists, either vanished, went mad, or took their own lives within months. Letters from their families all shared one haunting phrase. He keeps mumbling about the 4th. The number 4 appears again and again. For women, for children, for spirals, 4 nights in a year when the veil is thin. The Watchtower Circle believed these were not coincidences but instructions, a calendar marked in trauma and silence. And here's where it gets worse. One of the Watchtower archivists, Father Ellison Gray, traced the spiral to its origin. Not Dust Creek, not even this continent. He linked it to a buried structure beneath the Negev Desert. Another hatch, sealed by time, surrounded by 4 empty graves. He wrote one final letter before he burned every document and disappeared. She is not rising. She is returning. And she remembers who opened the door first. That door was not physical. It was Elijah. And perhaps it is you. There is a reason Elijah Hargrove's name still surfaces in whispered conversations among archivists, occultists, and those who have spent too long staring at maps with lines no one else sees. His story isn't just history. It's a blueprint, a set of instructions disguised as tragedy. Elijah wrote something before he vanished, a journal bound in animal hide, the pages stitched with what researchers believe was human hair. The journal surfaced briefly in 1898 when a traveling antiquities dealer tried to sell it in Kansas City. Witnesses described the writing as alive, letters that shifted when you looked at them too long. The dealer died 2 days later in a fire that burned only his wagon, leaving the rest of the street untouched. The journal was never seen again, but fragments of its text survived, transcribed by a man who went blind while copying them. They are maddeningly simple. 1 opens the door, 2 step through, 3 keep the name, 4 never seen again. Scholars argue endlessly about what it means, but they all agree on one thing. Elijah believed the 4 women were keys, not companions. He called them the corners of a single shadow, the structure needed to summon the mother below. The house wasn't a home. It was an altar, and maybe it still is. In 1956, a small team from university in Chicago attempted to study the remains of the Hollow House, hoping to document early settlement patterns. Their field notes, now sealed in a private archive, detail walls that hum when touched and a sourceless sound, like wind through bone. 2 students vanished on the 3rd day of the dig. The rest abandoned the project, and their professor ended up institutionalized, claiming he could hear footsteps in his dreams, 4 sets at once. Dust Creek was erased from maps soon after, officially labeled a failed settlement, its history sanitized, its name swallowed by the dust. But every few years, something stirs. Someone hears the whisper. Someone feels the pull. Maybe that's why you're here. Because once you hear this story, it isn't just history anymore. It's a mirror. In 1971, a team of sound engineers was dispatched to a stretch of forest 2 miles from the original Dust Creek boundary. Their mission wasn't paranormal, it was practical. Locals had reported an unexplained hum reverberating through the hills at night. Low, rhythmic, and almost biological in quality. The engineers set up directional microphones, vibration sensors, and long-range acoustic pickups. What they recorded has never been released to the public. But one member of the team, Alan Rusk, left behind audio reels marked simply with the word, womb. The recordings were never meant to be played through speakers. On tape, the sound is a pulsating drone, interrupted every few minutes by a distant knock, 4 times in succession. But when slowed down, the waveform shifts. The pattern forms a sequence that matches the layout of the original Hollow House floor plan. Somehow, the sound mapped the structure. But the true horror came from what the human ear couldn't detect. Spectral analysis revealed embedded frequencies, ones too low for conscious perception, but still able to stimulate the human nervous system. Subharmonic frequencies that could induce panic, vertigo, nausea, the same symptoms described by those who stood near the house before it collapsed. The same symptoms Elijah wrote about before he vanished. These weren't just sounds. They were calls. One neurologist who studied the audio lost consciousness while analyzing it. When revived, she described a dream of 4 faceless women standing in a circle, hands bound, mouths sewn shut, humming in unison. She had never heard of Dust Creek, never read Elijah's work. But she drew the spiral, perfectly, without knowing why. It gets worse. In 1984, a Vatican official anonymously submitted a report to the Watchtower Circle. It claimed that similar acoustic disturbances were being reported near ruins in Belarus, the Scottish Highlands, and northern Sudan. In each case, 4 women had been accused of witchcraft within a century of the anomaly. In each case, they were buried in unmarked graves facing downward, as if pinned to the earth. This is not a haunting. It's a synchronization. The hum is growing louder, as if the earth itself is tuning to something. A signal, a return. If you've heard it, you're already part of it. They called themselves the Echo Mothers. Not a cult, not a religion. Something far more primitive. A reawakening. The first documented Echo Mother appeared in 1992 in a psychiatric hospital just outside Marfa, Texas. Her real name was Susan Hallberg, a former violinist who had gone missing in 1989 after attending silent retreat in the Dust Creek region. When she was found, she had no ID, no speech, and her eyes had turned a milky gray. Doctors assumed cataracts, but tests showed her vision was perfect, almost too perfect. She could see frequencies of light outside the human spectrum. UV, infrared. She didn't blink. When she finally spoke, she whispered, "We hum because we are remembered. We hum because she is near." The doctors thought it was a breakdown, but they didn't understand the significance of her humming. Because when they amplified it, slowed it, and reversed it, it matched the exact waveform captured near the Hollow House ruins 20 years earlier. Susan wasn't broken. She was broadcasting, and she wasn't alone. By 1997, sightings of Echo Mothers had been reported in 7 countries. Always women, always barefoot, always humming in perfect unison when placed near one another, even if they had never met. One psychologist who observed them for a study in Norway began to suffer from hallucinations. Long corridors carved into earth, voices speaking from drains, the sensation of being watched by something under the room. He took his life 3 days later, writing only one phrase on his wall. They were never meant to be separate. That's the key. The Echo Mothers were not followers. They were vessels, fragments of something older that had been broken apart, sealed away in human form, and scattered across time. And now, as the hum grows louder, the fragments are remembering their shape. One woman, age 12, was found wandering an abandoned train tunnel in Pennsylvania, completely mute. She had no known family. When a priest tried to take her in, she traced 4 symbols into his palm. He went blind in both eyes the next morning. But the worst came later, when security footage caught her standing perfectly still in the dark for 8 hours and then vanishing in a single frame. Not walking away, disappearing. Elijah Hargrove never spoke the names aloud. He wrote them once, in blood, according to Watchtower records, then immediately burned the page, whispering what witnesses called a funeral rite in reverse. But fragments of those names were salvaged from notes, carvings in the beams of Hollow House, and the margins of his children's sketches. 4 names, never in full, always broken, hidden in different tongues. But when pieced together across continents, centuries, and madness, they form a sequence. Namara, Selhun, Virith, Olam. The words don't belong to any known language. Yet they appear again and again in unrelated cultures, ancient burial chants, even audio anomalies pulled from electromagnetic storms over the Atlantic. A linguist in Prague discovered that when you say all 4 names aloud in a particular cadence, 4 breaths, no pause, they trigger a measurable drop in ambient temperature. And in one instance, a mirror cracked without impact. Were they? Some believe they are the original bindings, the names the 4 women bore before they were human, before they were divided. Others say they are coordinates, not for places but for concepts like fear, silence, obedience, and return. In Elijah's final surviving letter, dated 3 days before his disappearance, he writes, "She does not have a name. She is made of 4. Speak them, and she hears. Speak them in order, and she turns. Speak them with belief, and she remembers her face. No one knows what her face is. But here's the most disturbing part. Each time the names have been spoken aloud, by accident, in ritual, or even as sound-based experiments, someone nearby has gone missing. In one case, an entire research station in Antarctica. 11 people. No signs of struggle. Only an open door and a spiral burned into the snow. These are not names. They are keys. And the door is not made of wood or metal. It's you, your mind, your belief, your attention. The Watchtower Circle now considers any attempt to reconstruct or chant the names an act of psychic treason. But that hasn't stopped the hum from growing louder. The spiral keeps appearing. The dreams return, especially to those who listen too long. Like you, the burial field has no official coordinates. It was erased from land records in 1852 after the federal land surveyor assigned to Ravenshade went mad and gouged out both his eyes with a compass needle. But his maps survived, not the official ones. The private ones. The ones he drew on stretched animal hide, soaked in ash water, then folded into quarters. At the center of the folds, a field of unmarked mounds. 17 in all. Shallow, uniform, perfectly circular. According to the surviving notes of Watchtower agent Marion Blythe, who reached the site in 1926 under heavy secrecy, the earth in this field was not natural. She wrote, "The soil repels breath. It does not grow moss or grass. It is as if the land was silenced, not just once, but ritually starved of memory. No crosses, no stones, but each mound had a single symbol carved at its base. A downward-facing spiral etched into iron discs, now rusted into the soil. Iron, not for permanence, but containment. Each mound, it seems, held not bodies but anchors. Vessels, for were women. The rest? Subjects. Failed versions. Echoes without echo. And it was here, beneath the weeping limbs of 12 black ash trees, that the first known synchronization ritual took place. Performed not by Elijah Hargrove, but by his first wife, Callista, a woman whose name is barely mentioned in the records. Not because she was forgotten, but because she was feared. It was Callista who first drew the spiral in her own blood. It was Callista who vanished for 9 days in the woods and returned with 4 ancient symbols scorched across her back. And it was Callista who, according to 3 conflicting testimonies, did not age during the final 6 years of her life. One local boy, long since grown, recalled seeing her walk the edge of the burial field in the dead of night, barefoot, whispering names into the soil. She was planting something that wasn't seeds, he said. She said it was memory, buried memory. But what does memory do when it's unearthed? In 2003, a drone accidentally filmed the burial site during a wildfire containment sweep. The footage was confiscated, but one frame leaked. 17 figures, faint, transparent, standing on the mounds. Waiting, their faces unfinished. The sealing of the burial field was not sanctioned by any government, church, or known order. It was done in absolute secrecy by 5 men, none of whom survived the year. Their names have been erased from official Watchtower archives, and only 2 photographs remain. Both are charred, faces scratched out. But one thing is clear. They weren't protecting the world. They were buying time. It began in winter 1882, when a string of disappearances swept the nearby town of Gravedale. Livestock at first, then children. No blood, no struggle. Just small depressions in the earth shaped like curled fists. Local hunters tracked one trail into the hollow woods near the burial site. What they found was described as a woman made of wind. She hovered 3 feet above the snow, mouth open but no sound. Just movement. A constant trembling, like she was vibrating in and out of place. 3 hunters went mad. One turned the gun on himself. The remaining villagers begged for help. None came, except a single envelope, postmarked from a location that no longer exists. Inside was one sentence. Build the vault. Do not bury it, bind it. And beneath that, 4 small iron nails and a seal drawing. The blueprint for what would become known as the Ironmouth Vault. Constructed at midnight under black veil and firelight, the vault was a crude stone tomb lined with sacramental salt, obsidian shards, and mirrors facing inward, always inward. At the center, the largest spiral yet, carved into the floor by a mute girl who had been drawing it in dirt since birth. She died after completing it. No cause, just silence. But the ritual wasn't complete without sacrifice. Each of the 5 men brought a piece of themselves, not blood, not bone. Something deeper, a memory they would never speak again. One gave up the sound of his daughter's laughter. Another forgot the smell of rain. The oldest forgot his own name. They did this not out of honor, but fear, because she had begun to whisper back. And when the vault was sealed, the humming stopped. For 80 years, until in 1961, a young geologist testing magnetic fields near Ravenshade recorded a tremor underground. Not seismic, not man-made. A heartbeat. The vault hadn't held. It had incubated. The Ironmouth Vault was not designed to imprison. It was designed to fool. A mimicry of containment, a theatrical burial meant to pacify something that knew it could not be destroyed. Because what lives inside the vault is not a creature, not a ghost, not a spirit bound by human rules. It is a memory with will, and it doesn't want freedom. It wants to be known. The first person to reopen the vault, intentionally or not, was Dr. Henry Lovick, a geologist with no knowledge of the Watchtower, the Echo Mothers, or Elijah Hargrove's warnings. He was just looking for anomalies in the rock strata. But the moment his team drilled beneath the site, their equipment failed. Compass needles spun violently. Recordings captured faint tones outside the human hearing range. His assistant, a woman named Eliza Carter, began speaking in reverse. Full conversations, perfect syntax, completely unaware she was doing it. That night, she burned her own tongue with a soldering iron. When Lovick descended into the open vault, he described the temperature as like standing inside someone else's memory. Cold, but only when thinking about a specific person, in his case, his mother. The moment he stopped thinking of her, the vault went still. The moment he remembered her again, the humming returned. He wrote in his journal, "This place is not a prison. It's a mirror. It doesn't echo your voice. It echoes what you forget." The spiral on the floor had deepened. Somehow, without physical alteration, the grooves had become sharper, darker, not carved but grown. Embedded in the spiral's center, a single, ancient tooth. Human. Small. Like a child's. But chemically, it matched no known species. 3 days later, Lovick disappeared. No signs of struggle. Just his journal, a trail of bloodless footprints, and one final entry scrawled in pencil. She knows I remember her now. Since that breach, no one has entered the Ironmouth Vault and returned unchanged. The few who dared speak of what they saw described figures in the walls, not moving, not alive, just watching. Some say they're the lost Echo Mothers, trapped mid-transition. Others believe they are failures, human vessels that broke before full memory integration. But here's the most harrowing discovery. The vault feeds on recognition. It strengthens not when you believe, but when you start to wonder if it might be true. That's why the humming never ends. Not because it's calling out, but because you are calling it. It began in hospital wards. Not in Ravenshade, but far from it, Oregon, Maine, Arkansas. Patients waking up from dreamless sleep, marked with raw, circular burns spiraling downward along their backs, ribs, even the soles of their feet. No memory of pain. No memory of how it happened. The doctors said it was fungal. The priests said it was demonic. But those who understood the markings, those familiar with the Ironmouth Vault, knew better. They were not wounds. They were seals. One victim, a 9-year-old boy named Caleb, had the spiral etched across his tongue. He was mute until that day. Then, with wide eyes, he began to recite the exact words written in Elijah Hargrove's lost journal. Words never published, never spoken aloud, only documented by Watchtower codebreakers, and locked in a vault in Vienna. He spoke them perfectly, and then he smiled. His mother, a devout woman with no ties to Ravenshade, took her own life within the hour, leaving behind a single line written in blood across her kitchen wall. I saw her eyes. They were mine. The markings didn't stop. Over the next 7 years, 32 unrelated individuals, all across the globe, were found bearing the same downward spiral. None of them had ever met. None had ever been to Ravenshade. But all of them shared one thing: recurring dreams of an unfinished woman walking backwards through their childhood homes. In every dream, she stopped, turned, and whispered the same question. Do you know what you forgot? Those who answered, even subconsciously, began to rot from within. Not physically, not medically, but existentially. Family forgot their names. Friends swore they'd never met them. Even photographs began to blur their faces. One by one, these marked individuals faded from memory. Their lives erased, but their bodies remained. Empty, still walking, still breathing, still dreaming. The Watchtower calls it echo collapse. But the original term used by the Echo Mothers was shrouding, the final phase of memory integration, when the mind is no longer anchored to flesh, but to invocation. In other words, they became vessels. For her. Who is she? What does she want? And why does she only speak through people who've forgotten something vital? Agatha Croft was not born in Ravenshade. She was born in Vermont, a place as far removed from spirals and vaults and whispering women as you could imagine. She was a botanist, a mother of 2, a woman of reason. Until the dreams began. It started with the sound. Not humming. Knocking. 3 slow raps at 2:17 a.m. every night for 7 days. Not at the door. Not at the window. From under her bed. By the 7th night, Agatha no longer believed she was asleep. And on the 8th, she woke up marked, a spiral carved down the back of her neck. No bleeding. Just open flesh, warm to the touch. Alive. Her doctors found nothing. Her family called it stress. But Agatha knew better. Because the moment the spiral appeared, her youngest son, Miles, stopped speaking her name. He looked at her, but saw nothing, like she was a stranger. She began to fade. Photographs, mail, credit records, erased piece by piece. Even her voice on recordings dissolved into static. Her hands shook, her teeth loosened, and then came the dreams. She was back in her childhood home, but everything was wrong. The walls were too thin, the hallways too long, and at the end of the corridor, standing backward, was herself. Only not quite. Same hair, same height, but no eyes. Just 2 perfect spirals carved deep into where sight should have been. The figure whispered, "You can stay or trade." Agatha chose to trade. What she gave up has never been confirmed. Not her voice, not her name, not even her soul, but something deeply core to her being. She returned days later, lying naked outside a Ravenshade chapel that had been abandoned since 1852. Her spiral marking was gone, but she no longer cast a shadow. People saw her, heard her, remembered her, but light no longer touched her the same. Cameras wouldn't capture her outline. Mirrors refused her reflection, and she began to warn others, not of what she saw, but what she felt. She said the thing in the vault doesn't hunt. It doesn't chase. It waits. It waits for us to forget enough, names, stories, prayers, faces, because the more we forget, the more space we leave open, and it moves into that space, one whisper at a time. When Agatha Croft resurfaced from the threshold of the Ironmouth Vault, she was not empty-handed. Hidden beneath her skin, in microscopic scars that only revealed themselves under ultraviolet light, were over 300 symbols burned in flesh. Spirals, yes, but far more intricate. Some resembled eyes with no pupils. Others mimicked the geometry of dried veins or fetal bone maps. It was not art. It was language. And it was not human. Experts brought in by the Watchtower, linguists, cryptographers, even Sufi mystics couldn't decipher it. Not fully. But one scholar, Father Michaelis Gray of the Black Ecclesia, recognized 3 of the symbols. He had seen them once before in an illuminated codex smuggled out of Kars Gemel, an ancient monastery that vanished beneath a landslide in 1741. That codex spoke of a being older than prayer, a female entity remembered only in silent ritual, never named aloud, never written in linear text. She was referred to as the woman before language. She is not a demon, not a god, not even a spirit in the conventional sense. She is what remains when a civilization forgets what it once worshipped, a relic of erased devotion. According to Agatha's scars, when finally transcribed and arranged, they form a crude diagram, not of a person, but a progression, a metamorphosis from birth to unbeing, from innocence to rejection to obliteration, and then return. The final symbol in the sequence is a downward spiral with a single vertical cut through its center. The Watchtower calls this glyph the cut root. Agatha simply called it Mother. And when asked who or what the Echo Mothers were protecting us from, she didn't hesitate. They are not protecting us from her, she said. They are protecting her from us. Because what lies in the Ironmouth Vault is not malevolent by default. It is memory waiting to be claimed. And when we forget enough of ourselves, when names fade, languages die, bloodlines break, she fills the gaps. She becomes what we lack. That's why the Echo Mothers erased their own children. It was the only way to keep her fragmented, dismembered across generations, never fully forming in any one mind. But something has changed. The dreams are spreading. The symbols now appear before sleep. And her voice is clearer, beneath the soil of Ravenshade, far below where any map dares to lead, there is a chapel, or what remains of one. It was discovered by accident in 1933 during a failed attempt to build a reservoir near the edge of Ironmouth Gorge. Workers struck stone and thought they'd hit bedrock, but it echoed, hollow and cold. And when they broke through, they found themselves inside something no blueprint or deed had ever recorded. A chapel, but upside down. The pews were bolted to the ceiling. The altar was sunken into the floor like a grave. The stained glass windows faced inward, illuminating nothing. There were no crucifixes, no scripture, only spirals, hundreds of them, etched into the walls with bare hands, layered so thick they bled into one another like veins. At the back of the chamber, behind a false stone panel, was a sealed lead box. Inside, a letter. No date, no signature, just 15 lines of perfect calligraphy, written in a hand that no analyst could match to any known style from the past 500 years. But the ink was fresh, as if the letter had just been written. The contents? To remember her is to build her. To speak her name is to plant her. To dig where she sleeps is to awaken the mirror. You read this, stop, turn around. Forget this place. Forget her voice. Forget your mother's hands. Forget your child's face. Forget, 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 or become the door. The lead box was resealed and buried beneath the Ravenshade Historical Society, where it remains locked inside an unmarked vault under 24-hour surveillance. No one is allowed near it without written permission from the Archival Council. But here's what they won't tell you. The person who discovered the chapel, a worker named Horace Dalwyn, was mute from birth. He couldn't read, couldn't write, and yet, after touching the letter, he began to speak, in the voice of a woman, a voice older than any dialect known to the region. He spoke only in spirals, not metaphors but loops of sound, syllables that folded into themselves. It wasn't language. It was memory made vocal. Horace never stopped speaking, until his jaw unhinged and his voice dissolved into blood. What was inside him didn't die. It moved. The child was born on the night of a solar eclipse, 1978, in the outskirts of Belcroft Hollow, 30 miles south of Ravenshade. Her mother, Janelle Mayer, died in labor. No medical explanation. No ruptures. No heart failure. She simply stopped breathing the moment the infant took her first. The attending nurse claimed the delivery room grew cold. Not a metaphorical chill. The 4 bags frosted over. Her breath fogged in the air. And when the child finally cried, the glass in the overhead lights shattered outward. No one would name her. Not the father, who disappeared 4 days later without packing a single item. Not the doctors. Not even the adoption agencies. She was cataloged only as subject number 33 and placed in the custody of Ravenshade Pediatric Observation Unit. From the outside, she appeared normal, save for one thing. She had no eyes. Not closed lids, not damage or birth defect, just smooth, pale skin where sockets should have been. But the doctors couldn't explain what came next. She blinked, not randomly, not spasmodically. She blinked in perfect rhythm, as if sensing light. They scanned her brain. Activity pulsed in her visual cortex, aggressively, as though she was seeing something, but not through light, not through normal means, through memory. On her 3rd night in the ward, the nurses reported the hallway cameras blacked out for 11 seconds. When the feed returned, she was no longer in her crib. She was standing, upright, at the door of the sealed psychiatric records archive. Inside her left palm, a single tooth. But it wasn't hers. It was adult-sized, etched with a spiral on both sides, and dated 1849 by a forensic dentist. They scanned her again. This time, under her scalp, nestled in the curvature of her skull, they found something the previous X-rays had missed. Carved not into the bone, but beneath it, like a birthmark no blade could reach, was a single word in ancient low Gothic. Hers. Doctors resigned. Clergy intervened. And by morning, she was gone. Every document, every image, every recording erased. All that remains is one drawing by a nurse who'd watched over her during the nights. A child standing in a sea of bones, her hand raised, and above her, a figure made of spirals, smiling without a mouth. Beneath the moss-choked fields of eastern Ravenshade lies a ruin so old, not even the town's founders recorded it. The original asylum, charred out of memory in the 1700s, was built atop older stone, older earth, and older silence. They called it St. Hallow's Refuge, but the name was a lie. The asylum served no known medical purpose. There were no records of patients, treatments, or staff rosters. What was kept there was not meant to be healed, but contained. When the earth finally gave way during a flood in 1961, the asylum's underground cellars surfaced, unearthed like a corpse clawing toward air. Investigators expected bones, but what they found were wells. Not water wells. 13 of them. Dry. Circular. Smooth stone. Carved too perfectly to be hand-chiseled, but bearing no machine marks either. Inside the wells? Hair. Not remnants. Not clumps. Full linings of human hair. Braided, layered, pressed like bedding against the walls. Each well contained strand from hundreds of individuals. Blonde, black, gray, red, some coarse, some infant fine. None of it decayed. Forensic labs confirmed an anomaly. The hair didn't match any local DNA. More chilling, there was no evidence it had ever grown from scalp or skin. Each strand was grown artificially. No follicles, no roots, as if the hair had never been attached to a living being. The purpose? Unknown, but a researcher, Dr. Elsabeth Rains, hypothesized the wells were gestation chambers. Not for children, not for adults, but for thoughts, memories, she theorized, so suppressed they formed a gravity of their own. Hair, in many cultures, has long been believed to store spiritual or ancestral memory. What if the spirals were not merely symbols, but wounds for the forgotten? Dr. Rains died 2 weeks later. She had entered one of the wells during a late-night analysis, alone. She was found in the fetal position, hair wrapped around her body like veins, her eyes open, her mouth sealed shut with strands from her own head. But the final report notes something darker. Her body weighed 30 pounds less than it had the day before. Not from decomposition, from something taken. In the winter of 1859, the Ravenshade undertaker, Mr. Elias Finch, began recording a series of burials that would never make it to the town's public register. He called them the Hushborn. 48 infants, all identical, all buried within a span of 7 months. Each from a different mother, each from a different part of the region. No two families knew each other. No bloodlines intersected. Yet each child bore the same features. Ashen skin, jet black hair, a crescent-shaped scar beneath the left ear, and one more detail no one dared speak of out loud. The children smiled at death. It was as if they recognized it. Elias kept a private journal, hidden beneath the floorboards of his embalming room. It wasn't found until 1922, when a group of renovators sought to turn the old mortuary into a town museum. In his journal, Elias describes something no coroner should ever have to write. They don't rot. Not like others. Not like anything. Their flesh resists the earth. Their bones murmur in the night. I've heard them call from 6 feet down. They say her name. Always the same one. Marith. The name appears 48 times in the undertaker's log. Sometimes in the margin. Sometimes scrawled across the page so violently the ink tore the parchment. On one occasion, Elias confessed he tried to rebury one of the bodies in secret, miles away in Blackridge Hollow. He dug a pit, salted it, and recited prayers from 3 separate religions. When he returned to Ravenshade, the coffin was back in its original plot, unopened, but the grass above it had grown black. And beneath the coffin, in the dirt, he found a single item, a pacifier, made of glass, and inside it, suspended in clear liquid, a single spiraled eyelash. Elias tried to alert the clergy. They excommunicated him. He tried to alert the mayor. He was ignored. In his final journal entry, he wrote only this: "You cannot bury what remembers being born." The journal ends there. No further records. But his grave, if you visit it today, bears no name. Just a spiral etched into the stone, and a second, smaller stone beside it. Blank. Waiting to the edge of Ravenshade's crumbling forest lies the Blackridge Foundling Archive, a forgotten orphan registry burned in 1913 under unknown circumstances. Only one ledger survived. Not the official one. Not the one with names and dates. But a map. A hand-drawn chart, stitched between 2 rotting leather covers. It was recovered from beneath the charred floorboards, sealed in wax, hidden between 2 bricks as if someone had wanted it to survive the fire. It wasn't a map of roads or property lines. It was a vein map. The land wasn't marked by rivers or boundaries, but by spiraling lines that converged on a single point. A stone formation deep in the marshlands once called Mother's Hollow. At the center of the map, scratched in something far deeper than ink, was a word, not written with a quill, but etched in with a blade or nail. Marith. And beneath it, in a different hand, Messier almost panicked. She listens where graves go deaf. Archivists who examined the map noted something disturbing. The lines weren't decorative. They were based on ancient burial sites, some dating back before the town existed. Each spiral connected places where twins had died, always one stillborn, the other silent by morning. The last spiral led directly to a single grave marked only with the number 77. Beneath that number, written so faintly it was nearly invisible, was this: I was born in the wrong direction. She came first. I came screaming. That child was never identified. But the Blackridge foundling home, 7 children have been documented drawing the exact same map in charcoal on the walls of their dormitory. None of them had seen the original. None had ever been taught cartography. And none could explain why they wept when they finished. One of them, a girl named Judith, claimed the spirals came to her in dreams. She said Marith showed her the way home. But when asked what home looked like, Judith didn't describe a house. She described a mouth, one with no teeth, one big enough to swallow the sky. That night, Judith vanished. No window opened, no door breached, just a trail of spirals burned into the floor where she had slept. The last one led to the wall, and beyond it, no footsteps, only silence. In 1978, a mining crew digging beneath Ravenshade's northern ridge, searching for limestone, hit something no pickaxe could shatter. At precisely 91 feet down, they struck bone, but not animal bone, not even human. Architectural bone. What they uncovered was the dome of an underground cathedral, not built from stone, but from a calcium-like structure that echoed when touched and bled a clear, sap-like fluid when fractured. It was not on any map. It had no doorways, no stairs leading to it, just a breathing silence. The team, thinking they'd found a prehistoric ossuary or burial mound, called in archaeologists. But what those experts found destroyed their careers and nearly erased their names from academic history. The altar, situated at the dome's center, was a single, massive vertebra carved into a throne-like structure. It faced an organ built from spinal cords, ribcage flutes, and what appeared to be hundreds of finger bones strung like heartstrings. When touched, the organ emitted a hum, a harmony so low and resonant, it made some of the crew vomit. Others cried. One man seized on the spot, and on the walls, scratched deeply into the organic material, was that same word, again and again. Marith. But this time there was more. A phrase, repeated in spirals that wound up toward the cathedral's blackened ceiling. She sings in the blood that forgets its own name. The language wasn't Latin. It wasn't Aramaic. It bore no resemblance to any recorded tongue. But every child brought near the site responded the same way. They wept, not out of fear, not pain, recognition. A hushborn boy named Caleb was brought in by accident. His foster family had been nearby on a day trip. When they entered the dome, Caleb walked directly to the altar, placed his palm on the bone, and whispered. She left her mouth open so he could crawl back in. Then he collapsed. When revived, he was blind. His retinas were burned, not from light, but from pattern overload. MRI scans later showed spiraled scar tissue forming across the surface of his brain. The site has since been sealed, but underground that organ still hums. Monitors pick up subtle frequencies every 47 hours, low, slow pulses that match the rhythm of a heartbeat. Whose? That remains the most disturbing question of all. In 1949, the Sisters of the Silent Order operated a remote convent outside Ravenshade, built not for worship, but for containment. Its purpose? Unspoken. Its walls? Windowless. Its inhabitants? 24 children, all foundlings, all orphans, all hushborn. The convent, known officially as St. Riatha's Sanctuary, was shut down in 1951 after a fire destroyed its eastern wing. The cause was never identified, but in 1992, inside a condemned property owned by a retired nun, investigators uncovered a rusted tin box buried beneath the foundation. Inside were 6 reels of 16mm film. 5 were blank, but the 6th was labeled in a trembling hand. Spiral Choir, second attempt. What the footage contained has never aired publicly. Most of the team that viewed it at Ravenshade Historical Society refused to speak afterward. But one technician, shortly before resigning, transcribed what he could. The footage shows a darkened chapel, lined with rotted pews. The children, 24 of them, stand barefoot in a perfect spiral. Each wears a white gown. Each has a black ribbon stitched across their eyes. They do not move. They do not breathe until the organ plays. That same bone organ hum from the underground cathedral. As the resonance grows, the children begin to chant, not in Latin, not in English, but in the same alien tongue discovered on the cathedral walls. And though none have been taught the language, their cadence is flawless. Rhythmic, ritualistic. At the center of the spiral stand a girl. Her mouth sewn shut, not surgically, ritually, black thread looped in spirals around her lips, held with bone pins. She never blinks. She never looks up. But the technician's notes say this. She isn't mouthing the chant. She's making it happen. The sound is coming from behind her, or through her, as if her silence is what's singing. Midway through the footage, a high-pitched frequency overtakes the reel. The technician noted that several of the children smile, and then the camera begins to shake violently, not from the operator, but from inside the room. At timestamp 1647, the screen goes black, but not before a final frame. The girl at the center is gone, and in her place, where she stood, a spiral of teeth arranged on the floor, each tooth engraved with a symbol that matches carvings found in the chapel walls. The reel ends with one final scratch etched into the celluloid itself. She hums where the womb once wept. Long before Ravenshade bore its cursed name, before the manor, before the fires, before the Hushborn even had a name, there was a woman known only in record as the Hollow Midwife. Her real name was never confirmed. Her birth date? Unknown. But what is certain is this. In 1801, in a township 3 miles from where Ravenshade now stands, a mute midwife was summoned to attend a string of strange births, each accompanied by unnatural phenomena. Birds crashing into windows, clocks reversing, even entire patches of farmland wilting under moonlight. She could not speak, but she could draw, and what she drew should never have survived. Sealed in oilskin, her journal was recovered from beneath the floorboards of the abandoned Wayland Chapel. It contains over 90 illustrations, none labeled with words, only spirals, bloodlines, and twisted infants with pitch-black mouths. But there was one repeated figure, a feminine face, half cloaked in shadow, the other side a skull. She appears in the background of every image, watching the births, sometimes crouching in rafters, sometimes hanging from the ceiling, and once, holding the newborn while the mother stares hollow-eyed and bleeding from the ears. The journal ends with a 2-page spread, soaked in something dark and crusted, possibly dried blood. On one side, a spiral drawn over and over until the paper nearly tore. On the other, the face of the woman once more. Only this time, her skull side is weeping, and the shadow side is smiling. Below the face, in the only piece of text found in the entire book, the midwife had scratched a single sentence with what appeared to be a quill made from her own hair. I caught her looking through the child's eyes. She never delivered another baby. A week later, she disappeared. But on the same night, in the nearby town of Lowering Cross, 12 infants were born, all still, all twisted in the womb. Each one's tongue had been replaced with a black ribbon. The doctors blamed infection, but no two were related. No shared bloodline, no common illness. What they did share, a strange mark etched into the back of each neck, visible only under moonlight. The spiral, always the spiral. Long before Ravenshade bore its cursed name, before the manor, before the fires, before the Hushborn even had a name, there was a woman known only in record as the Hollow Midwife. Her real name was never confirmed. Her birth date? Unknown. But what is certain is this. In 1801, in a township 3 miles from where Ravenshade now stands, a mute midwife was summoned to attend a string of strange births, each accompanied by unnatural phenomena. Birds crashing into windows, clocks reversing, even entire patches of farmland wilting under moonlight. She could not speak, but she could draw, and what she drew should never have survived. Sealed in oilskin, her journal was recovered from beneath the floorboards of the abandoned Wayland Chapel. It contains over 90 illustrations, none labeled with words, only spirals, bloodlines, and twisted infants with pitch-black mouths. But there was one repeated figure, a feminine face, half cloaked in shadow, the other side a skull. She appears in the background of every image, watching the births, sometimes crouching in rafters, sometimes hanging from a ceiling, and once, holding the newborn while the mother stares, hollow-eyed and bleeding from the ears. The journal ends with a 2-page spread, soaked in something dark and crusted, possibly dry blood. On one side, a spiral drawn over and over until the paper nearly tore. On the other, the face of the woman once more. Only this time, her skull side is weeping, and the shadow side is smiling. Below the face, in the only piece of text found in the entire book, the midwife had scratched a single sentence with what appeared to be a quill made from her own hair. I caught her looking through the child's eyes. She never delivered another baby. A week later, she disappeared. But on the same night, in the nearby town of Lowering Cross, 12 infants were born. All still, all twisted in the womb. Each one's tongue had been replaced with a black ribbon. The doctors blamed infection. But no two were related. No shared bloodline. No common illness. What they did share, a strange mark etched into the back of each neck, visible only under moonlight. The spiral. Always the spiral, in the archives of the forgotten village of Marrow's End, buried beneath fire-damaged parish scrolls and sealed confessional logs. One parchment remained untouched by time. It was bound in skin, not paper. The ink, a mixture of ash and what scholars later confirmed was umbilical blood. At the top of the first page, scrawled in trembling calligraphy, is the title, The Bell-Rung Pact. According to its entries, the year was 1673, and something unnatural had taken hold of the wombs across 4 counties. Mothers would give birth to children with no eyes, but the ability to hum ancient tunes. Midwives began recording dreams shared by these children, visions of underground cathedrals, bone altars, and a faceless woman who whispered lullabies that twisted the air into knots. In desperation, a hidden sect of women, midwives, gravediggers, and what the church deemed wither wives, gathered under moonless skies. And they made a covenant. They did not ask God for mercy. They rang the bell of St. Thor's Hollow, a derelict church long abandoned due to Black Plague and blasphemy. Legend claimed its bell hadn't rung since the priest was found crucified upside down inside its steeple. But when the 13 midwives gathered and rang it once more, something answered, not with words, with wind. The trees surrounding the chapel split at their trunks. The air grew thick with the smell of milk and iron. And in the center of their circle, a child appeared. Not born, not summoned, delivered, fully formed, gasping, silent. Her eyes were completely black. Her mouth was closed, but not sewn. It was folded inward, as if stitched by some force before flesh even knew shape. She was named nothing, but the midwives called her the Hollow Mother. The pact was written that night. The midwives agreed to deliver in silence, never speaking the names of those they birthed. In exchange, the births would no longer end in death, but every 44th child would be claimed by her. Not killed, taken back. Each time the bell was rung again, one hushborn would vanish from their cradle. No doors broken, no windows opened, just an empty bundle of linen, still warm. In time, the church raised St. Thor's to ash, but villagers claimed they still heard the bell at night, echoing across the moors, especially when the moon was absent and the wind carried the scent of blood milk. Locked within the Vatican's secret archives, buried in a restricted codex known only by its classification, Codex Tenebrae 44, lies a collection of scrolls so rarely accessed, even seasoned archivists refer to them only in whispers. They are not written in Latin, nor Hebrew, nor Greek. They are written in Merethic, a forbidden tongue said to predate Babel. The codex was first referenced in 1892, after a Jesuit scholar named Father Emericaro delved into obscure manuscripts discussing spiral births and choirs without lungs. He disappeared weeks later, but not before leaving behind a letter, addressed to his superior, that read, "We were wrong. The children are not possessed. They are designed." Inside Codex Tenebrae 44 lies a map, not to a location, but to a pattern, a mathematically perfect spiral etched into the catacombs beneath Vatican Hill, buried just beyond the ossuary corridors. The spiral is not carved into stone. It's formed by the arrangement of bones. Thousands of infant skulls, each one engraved with a name. Not Christian names, but identifiers, sequences of glyphs that match no earthly language, but match the carvings found in Ravenshade's hidden cathedral. The scrolls accompanying the spiral describe them as the claimed children born under a specific frequency, a frequency Marith sings. One scroll, torn at the edge, bears a chilling diagram. Concentric circles with notations about resonant wombs, women genetically predisposed to hearing Marith's hum during childbirth. These mothers, once exposed, do not dream as others do. They dream in static, in harmonics, in her spiral. The Vatican deemed these births apostate parturitions, a direct threat to divine order, an anomaly in human design. But rather than destroy the records, they catalog them, preserve them, because they knew something the world did not. Each hush-born child shares the same heartbeat. At exactly 3:03 a.m. every night, no matter where they are, those marked children's pulses sync in unison. Across oceans, across bloodlines, it is the hum's signal, a ritual in rhythm, a summoning not yet complete. Beneath the final scroll lies a note, and signed. When the 44,000th child is born, the cathedral shall rise again. Not in stone, in flesh. The east wing of Ravenshade Manor was walled off in the winter of 1861, by order of Governor Llewellyn Blackthorn himself. No workers were paid, no tools left behind. No blueprint of the modification exists in any architectural record. Just silence and a new wall. For over a century, that portion of the estate was forgotten, until 1984, when a freak lightning strike set the west parlor ablaze and exposed the weakened mortar behind a crumbling bookshelf. Beneath the scorched timber, investigators discovered a hidden keyhole shaped not like a lock, but a spiral. They called in a specialist, Dr. Helene Vorst, an expert in antique symbology and Gothic architecture. What she found would haunt her to the edge of sanity. Behind the wall was a room not found on any blueprint. Not a nursery, not a chapel, a convergence chamber. Its walls were covered in organic etchings, etched with no tool. The material was not wood, nor stone. It was calcified marrow. In the center stood a single wooden cradle. Black oak, seamless, no nails, no joints, and it rocked, gently, rhythmically, despite no wind, no slope, no mechanism. It never stopped. Dr. Vorst stayed in the room for 6 minutes. She emerged bleeding from the ears, trembling and blind in one eye. Her only words? There is no child, but the cradle is listening. Audio taken from a recording device hidden in her coat captured an eerie static, broken only once by a distant, whisper-like voice. One more, one more, one more. The door to the chamber was resealed that same week. The spiral keyhole filled with molten iron. But 4 months later, the manor's new groundskeeper, a man named Elias Greaves, reported something impossible. He saw footprints leading away from the sealed wall. Small, bare, and wet, trailing all the way to the south garden, and then simply ending. No child was found, but every rose bush in the garden had wilted to ash. The earth beneath them, warm to the touch, as if something had slept beneath it, or was waiting to emerge. Elias Greaves never believed in ghosts. A retired soldier and staunch pragmatist, he took the Ravenshade groundskeeper position for solitude, not superstition. But after the night he found those barefoot footprints, wet, warm, and ending in scorched soil, Elias stopped sleeping. He started listening, not by choice. The manor began making sounds. Not creaks, not groans, something deeper. Beneath the stone, beneath the marrow-bone walls of the sealed chamber. A heartbeat. At first, he mistook it for the old pipes, but it pulsed with too much precision, too much intent. Once, at 3:03 a.m., he pressed his ear to the floorboards just outside the east wing. He wept, because what he heard was not just a thump, it was a hum, a low, resonant drone that vibrated through the walls and into his spine, making him feel not fear, but recognition. He had heard that sound before, in war, in the silence just before mortar fire, when the air thickens and reality folds inward. He began drawing spirals in his sleep, hundreds of them, on walls, on windows, into the dirt. onto his arms, perfectly shaped, all counterclockwise. Then, one night, he found something even more disturbing. The cradle's rocking had grown faster. Though sealed behind the wall, its motion echoed through the floor with increasing speed, like something preparing to hatch. Elias began recording the hum with an old reel-to-reel. He sent a tape to a radio technician in Boston. Weeks later, a single word arrived in a telegram. Womb. Not long after, Elias disappeared. No sign of struggle. No forced entry. Just his coat, folded neatly at the edge of the east wing. And inside its pocket, a journal. The last entry. The house isn't haunted. It's pregnant. And it's listening for its name. Under that line, a sketch. A spiral. But this time it wasn't alone. Around it, 43 small dots. And one larger one, still empty. The 44th, tucked beneath the false lining of Governor Lewin Blackthorn's personal Bible, kept locked away in a vault since 1861, was a single, decaying parchment. Not scripture. A ledger. Each line recorded with cold precision. Each entry titled with a single word. Hushborn. The first name on the list is dated March 3rd, 1833, 10 years before the manor's east wing was even built. The child was unnamed. The annotation reads, eyes open at birth, tongue split, pulse sinks with a hum, removed to the convergence cradle. Not viable. One by one, the names follow. 43 children. Each line more disturbing than the last. Some were born in the manor. Others delivered under strange circumstances across Ravenshade and transported there in secret. All before their second birthday. All under the Blackthorn name, whether by blood or force. The final recorded child? March 3rd, 1861. Name, Eden Wraith. A girl. The notes say, resonance level, high. Spine curled in spiral at birth. No vocal cords. Dreams recorded in merethic glyphs. Cradle accepted her. Integration begun. Then silence. No entry after her. No 44th. Just a space. A blank line. Waiting. But the parchment doesn't end there. At the very bottom, in red ink, different from the others, a final phrase. The womb is not a woman. It is the house. The implication is staggering. The manor itself, a living structure designed by ancient blueprints buried deep in forgotten symbology, is producing its own children. The cradle isn't a relic. It's an umbilicus, a link between what was buried beneath Ravenshade and what is trying to rise again through it. Eden Wraith didn't die. She merged. The rocking of the cradle, the spirals, the hum, all are symptoms of a gestation not tied to biology, but to design. The house was never meant to be a home. It was meant to be a vessel. And the empty space on the ledger? A slot waiting for one final name. Yours? March 3rd, 2025. Ravenshade Manor stands silent. Boarded. Abandoned. Guarded not by locks, but by dread. The kind only the locals still speak of in whispers. Yet at precisely 3:03 a.m., every motion sensor along the east wing activated at once. No doors opened, but inside the sealed convergence chamber, the rocking stopped. After 164 years, the cradle fell still. The hum, that terrible, low vibration, documented for generations, ceased. No final note. No fade. Just silence. A silence thick enough to choke. Paranormal teams rushed in, but what they found was worse than anything they imagined. The wall was still sealed, the spiral keyhole intact, but the inside? Empty. The cradle was gone. Not removed. Gone, like it had never existed. Except for one thing. Etched into the floorboards, in that marrow-like material, were two words. I'm awake. No evidence of forced entry. No burn marks. No blood. But across town, an orphanage once known as the Briar Hollow Institute reported something strange. All the mirrors in the building, 43 in total, shattered inward. And the children? Every single one of them woke at the exact same second and spoke the same word. Mother. But there is no mother. Only a house. Only a cradle. And only one final slot in the ledger. You see, the legend was never just about the past. It was a ritual. A clock. Winding down. Spiraling inward. The Hushborn were never meant to remain in Ravenshade. They were the seeds. And now, the final child has emerged. Not from womb, but from wood. Not to be born, but to gather. The spiral is complete. 44 has awakened, and it listens through stories like this. So if you felt a pull, if your ears rang during this video, if the shadows near you deepened, if you've seen the spiral in your dreams, you've already been counted. Ravenshade doesn't need to find you. It already has. DeadScroll will continue to unveil the horrors history tried to bury. But now, we ask you to leave a mark that hears. Comment the words, "The Cradle is listening," and subscribe to join the next descent into the forgotten. Because what's coming next is already here.